All right, Ryan, thanks for your time, man. Appreciate it. It's been, March of 21. We did an episode back in, it's over 2
It's
years
so
ago.
wild
So
how,
I
it's
know,
so
man.
wild how fast time goes. But
It
looking forward to
is.
this conversation and joining you again, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you're one of my, you're one of my the podcasts I follow. I love your content, right? It's just, I think we think very similarly, and I think based on your audience, my audience, a lot of us a lot of us are having the same conversations and having the same struggles. So that's why I love your content, and we'll get into
No
all that.
doubt.
But so
Awesome.
what when I reached out to you back in, I guess it was February, I heard you were, you had released an episode where you were pretty, I can hear I didn't hear the pain in your voice, but you had kind of admitted some, your struggle with alcoholism and your kind of newfound sobriety. So, that was obviously we'll talk about a whole bunch of stuff, but maybe starting there. I think because I think it's an underpinning. It's a symptom of a lot that we're all going through, whether it's a midlife crisis or whether it's a lack of meaning, et cetera, et cetera. I think life's amazing, but God, it's damn hard if you're trying to really excel at it. And I certainly think you're one of those folks that want to kind of skid into that deathbed, having done everything that you can to make it an amazing journey. So I
Yeah.
guess start there, man. How's it going with your struggle with alcohol?
Well, I mean, that's been good. I've been sober for, let's see, since August 1st of last year. So what's that? August, September.
Yeah, 10 months now, almost like
So
11
yeah,
months.
10
Yeah,
monze.
wow.
Yeah, 10 months. So
And this is
that's
zero
been good.
alcohol, zero, not
That's right.
social
Yeah.
drinker. Mm.
No, yeah, no, I don't drink socially. I don't drink at all. So yeah, it's been 10 months. Yeah, man, it was getting bad. Like I started drinking. I actually had a problem with alcohol about 20 years ago when I was a kid right out of high school. Like I was drinking in high school. Out of high school, where it was just more accessible, it got even worse. And I remember I came home from work one day and it, there was a 6 pack or something in the fridge, and so I just downed that real quick. And I was sitting on the couch. I'm like, what are you doing? You're not even drinking socially anymore. Like you're
Yeah.
not even at a party. You're just doing this right after you get home from work. I was
Right.
19 years old at the time, 18 or 19 years old. I'm like, yeah, I don't need to be doing this. So I stopped. And it really didn't rear its ugly head until, almost 20 years later. And so I had a drink, maybe once a week. And then that turned into a couple times a week. And that turned into every night. And that turned into some day drinking. And then, I mean, it got so bad at the height of my alcoholism. And I'm hesitant to use that word alcoholism because I think there are people who are like truly addicted to alcohol, like chemically addicted
Mm.
to alcohol. And I don't know that it was that severe, but certainly alcohol abuse. I mean, I think that's an appropriate
Yeah.
phrase to use. And maybe alcoholism, but I for whatever reason, alcohol abuse seems more fitting to my personal situation. But yeah, it got so bad that I would go to the convenience store and get a half pint or whatever of whiskey, and I would down that before I even get started with the day. And I'm talking like every day. So
Mm.
I was either drunk, hungover, or getting drunk about 90+% of the time that I was awake. So it got really, really bad. And I convinced myself that it wasn't that bad. I was showing up. The work was still going pretty well. I was still fairly successful. The finances were taken care of. I thought the family situation was dialed. And so I really was able to pull the wool over my eyes about what I was doing and how I was showing up, which was not good.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's where alcohol's sneaky because I was going to ask you this next. You seemed like you were high functioning. So if you're high functioning,
Totally.
right, your bills are getting paid. Some people you get more productive at work because they just find they ride that rush of that blood alcohol rise. Now I think net it's a negative. I think we'll certainly agree, but you almost use it as a tool. And I've had conversation with friends. They're like, "Wow, no, man, I have a couple drinks and I'm just laser focused." It's like an Adderall. People take Adderall, and you do all these justifications where people are on Adderall to get work done, and they have some I just use alcohol. What's the difference? And then you
Right.
get into all these tap dancing sort of justification kind of mechanisms, but you're right. It's very sneaky where you're like, I'm fine. I mean, everything's fine, and I think you'll probably agree where shit wasn't fine. I mean, your relationships are
No.
kind of dwindling a little. You're not yourself. You're not seeing you're not seeing what you should be seeing to address it, right? It's just it's I
Right.
mean,
Yeah. I was what people would consider high functioning. Everything was going well. Nobody knew. I mean, my wife knew. My kids. I didn't know my kids knew, but my older kids knew.
Mm,
Um, so outside of that, nobody else knew. So I was kind of a closet, not kind of. I was a closet drinker. I didn't want anybody else to know,
yeah.
which is a pretty good indicator that I shouldn't be engaged in that activity if I don't want other people to know. If I have a problem with that,
Giant red
you
flag.
know,
Yeah.
and it kind of came to a head because my wife came to me, my now ex-wife came to me, and this was July 31st of last year, 2022, and said, "Hey, I want to divorce. I'm out."
Mm,
And I switched everything up. You know, I started going to AA. I started working with a therapist to try to get to the root of what was going on behind the alcoholism. And, you know, for the past 10, 11 months now, have really been on a journey to improve myself, to show up more fully for my family. Unfortunately, too little too late with my now ex-wife, the mother of my
mm,
kids. So that was a really dark time for me. So this last year has been a real kick in the balls. And in spite of all that, like there's some real things I'm optimistic about in my life, about the relationship I now have with my kids and how that's improving, my own personal performance, the business, how I feel mentally, emotionally, spiritually about my life. Like there's some real things to be optimistic about. But yeah, I blew a lot of things up over the past couple of years, and that's some guilt and shame that I'm gonna have to live with for the rest of my life. But I'm trying to use it as fuel to move forward and be better and
yeah.
improve how I show up as a man.
So obviously, you resorted to alcohol for a reason, and I don't think the journey's ever finished. And saying, "Oh, that was why," and you can just kind of circle something on a piece of paper, and like, "Ah, that was the culprit." That's why I was drinking so
Yeah,
much.
yeah,
What do you think you were dulling? What were you? What did alcohol serve? Why was it so? Why did you switch to that? Do you
yeah.
think?
For me, it was a great way to escape momentarily.
Mm-hmm.
There a lot of stress, a lot of pressure with what was going on with the business, and we got a lot of attention and notoriety, and the business was growing, and we were helping a lot of guys. But I also felt a lot of pressure to perform. I felt a lot of pressure to show up a certain way, to put this persona or this person out there. And I was telling other guys that you should have other men in your corner. Uh, you should have guys that hold you accountable. And I actually thought I had that because I created this organization where that's exactly what we do. So I thought because I'm part of this organization, I
Right.
have that. But what I realized is that as I was working to serve other men and tell them that they needed to have other men in their corner, I really didn't have those deep connections because I was leading the organization. I wasn't actively engaged in the organization.
Mm,
And there's a huge difference. But I was able to fool myself into thinking because we've got all of these guys who are interested in what we're doing, that I'm getting the benefit of it. But I wasn't deep diving into the relationships that I had with other men. And
mm,
so it was nice, the way that my mind works is it doesn't really shut off. I'm very obsessive when I see a goal or a destination. I'm pretty relentless towards that objective. And frankly, to be able to tap out for the evening was a really nice experience where I didn't have to think about the business. I didn't have to think about my responsibilities in the business or what content I was going to create tomorrow.
right.
And it just got its little foot in the door, and that's all it took. Again, especially with my obsessive personality, I don't dabble. And I've had a lot of guys they'll say things like, well, a real, you hear this, a real man can have a drink but not let it consume him. Well, I don't think that's true. I mean, sure,
Data
some
doesn't
men can do
support
that.
that. Sorry.
I can't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an obsessive all in kind of guy. So when
Yeah.
I go, I go. And so people are like, "Oh, you could just have a drink moderately." I'm like, man, if I have a drink, I'm having all the drinks. There is
Right.
no a drink for
Mm,
me. So I've had to abstain and realize that just even that temptation or walking into that door is just not going to produce effective results for me.
mm. Yeah, I'm gonna have all the drinks. Yeah, I mean, and the crazy part is the same persona that allows folks like you and others to succeed and just kill it at many things is the same, I think, persona that's going to unfortunately run into trouble with alcohol and other substances because you're all in. You're all in. You want to have those
Right.
super high highs, then you need those super low lows to get you out of it, and then you hit that cycle. And I have that conversation with folks all the time. A lot of us, I'm absolutely wrapped in the same cloth. It's like just kind of the general okay mediocrity. Nothing's too high, nothing's too low. Just kind of we'll just be fine. We'll make a good amount of money. We'll just go to our 9 to 5. Gosh, that sounds
No
so
way.
miserable. It sounds so
Yeah.
miserable. I've told people this in the past. I almost enjoy those. I know those super highs are going to they're going to result in super lows. When you wake up that next morning, like, God damn, why did I do that? And then you kind of start that cycle over again. But I think if you zoom out and someone asks you, well, would you rather have that, those little peak highs at night, or whenever you're, whatever it is, you're chasing something, whether it's a business deal or whether it's a quick, fix from alcohol or anything else, knowing that you're going to feel like shit the next day, or having that crash later, is that net better than just being kind of feeling okay forever? And it's like my honest opinion is no. I'd rather have the high highs and those low lows crash. I'd rather have that feeling. And I don't know, is that an adrenaline junkie by the original definition of the term? I mean, now it's more dopamine. We realize the brain works. It's not really adrenaline, but there is that sort of like, are we like? And I kind of getting into more of some of the notes I sent you. You deal with a lot of men, and do you and your these teams of men that you've been sort of coaching, do you feel that the that we as men have a sort of different default that we have to struggle with and hone and work on that maybe women don't? And I say that because many of us are in marriages, and the first thing to sort of, the first breach in the dam is usually a marriage or relationship with kids, and that's what gets super complicated. So having that understanding between what men need versus what women need, I think, is so important. I don't think it's the same thing. A lot of, there's a huge overlap, but I think there's unique needs in both. So I guess my question is do you feel like us as men have a unique sort of need that's really, we don't understand fully how to meet those needs yet as you get into our 30s, 40s, like, what I mean, call it midlife crisis, but do you think
Yeah.
something's unique about us men?
I mean, let's talk about the similarities. There's a term I use called the natural man, but that applies to women as well. We're biologically hardwired to expend as few calories as possible and consume as much as possible.
Yeah, survival.
Like that's the reality of it. It's survival, exactly.
Yeah,
So when we were, naked and digging holes in the ground or looking for caves in the rocks to dwell, that's what we were doing. It's like, okay,
mm,
don't expend energy and maximize every calorie that you possibly can. That's what we were doing. And so now when we live in this not environment of scarcity, but this environment of abundance, we're
yeah,
still bringing that same biological hardwiring to the table, which is why a lot of us are fat, why a lot of us are lazy, why a lot of us are immediate gratification, why a lot of us will rob, steal, and plunder in order to get what we want without the work required to achieve it.
right.
That's what we actively have to fight against. If you're looking at it from a religious standpoint, man is fallen. Like we're a fallen species,
Mm,
right? And so by default, we're sinners. By default, we're lazy and immediate gratification, not productive, consumption only. We actively have to fight against that. Now, that said, from a perspective of what is unique and different, even if it's subconscious or an unwritten rule in society, men are protectors, providers, and presiders. Like that doesn't go away.
yeah,
We are biologically hardwired to fulfill those roles: protect, provide, preside. Preside is synonymous with leadership. So there is an expectation, whether it's expressed and verbalized and communicated, or not expressed and just kind of understood and kind of lies under the surface, that we are to protect other people, we are to provide even at our own expense, and we are to lead, especially in times of crisis. So that weighs heavy on a man who hasn't ever learned how to do that, is fighting against the natural man, is fighting against a society that subconsciously believes that we protect, provide, preside, but also simultaneously mocks us for doing so.
yeah,
And it's no wonder that little boys are growing up so confused. Not only are men not in their presence, and even if they are, they're not great examples of what it means to be a man. We have a society that acts as if we should operate one way, but mocks us and scorns and ridicules us for behaving that way. So what would you have us do? Now it's easy to say, well, a man just does what he needs to do in spite of all that. And I agree. I do agree that a man protects, provides, presides in spite of what other people are telling him or how
hmm,
they're coming after him or might make him feel. But still, there's a conflict there. And we are left to wrestle with that. And oftentimes we do it alone
hmm,
because of the scorn and the mockery and the ridicule that comes with it. And also, somewhere along the way, we bought into this cultural idea that we are to be lone wolves. I mean, I remember when I was a kid,
yeah,
I'm 42 years old. When I was a kid, I would see cartoons or or commercials of the Marlboro Man.
Right, right,
And
right.
how awesome was the Marlboro Man? But he was a rebel. He was a renegade. He did things alone. He was cool, but he did it alone. Then you have James Bond, same concept. Cool, calm, collected, capable, womanizer, had all the gadgets, was wealthy,
Right.
good looking, but he did it alone, a rebel. He doesn't do it with other people. Then you have Jason Bourne and all of these characters that we idolize and we look up to, and we almost assume as if they're the epitome of masculinity. You can't tell me that that doesn't have some sort of impact or influence in the way that we show up. And so if a man says, you know what, I need help.
Mm,
What? You need help? You can't do it on your own? You're not a man.
right,
That's what society says. That's what men say to each other.
right.
So it's no wonder that we're operating alone and then we feel alone. And look, when I was at the height of my alcoholism, well, let me say it this way. When I told a few close friends about my alcoholism, they said, I know.
Oof.
They said, I know.
Damn.
And look, I'm
Mm,
not putting this on them. It's not their responsibility. My alcoholism or alcohol abuse is not their responsibility. But also, I was like, wait, what? You knew? Oh, yeah, I knew. I could smell it, or there was experiences or things that you said or did.
mm,
Like, I knew. But man, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you tell me?
yeah.
You know, and that's part of the symptom of not having a strong, tight knit group of brothers that holds each other accountable, even if it's awkward, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it risks the relationship. That's what we got to do as men.
Mm. Yeah, that's hard as hell. I mean, so I mean, have you? You said you weren't doing that, but have you gotten better there? Are you forming a circle? I mean, you lead a lot of
Yeah,
men to do that, but you're saying you're putting a lot of oxygen masks on, your fellow, you know, folks on the
totally.
airplane, but you had none on. Did you put your mask? If you put on your mask, or at least
I mean,
trying
I
to?
am like it's not something that you do and it's done. It's an active process. It's
Sure.
dynamic, right? And you have to find men in your corner. But one example is I just went to lunch with a good friend of mine. His name's Wayne. He's here in town. We actually went to high school together, and
Hmm.
I messaged him and I'm like, hey man, let's get together for lunch this week. And so him and I went to lunch and we had a really good conversation about relationships and marriage and what's working and in work and life and
Right.
personally. But the challenge with that is that you're going to have to go first as a man. So many guys are like, oh, can I just tap into something and it'll be great? No, you can't, because it doesn't exist. Because all the other men out there, they feel the same as you do. They've been conditioned to believe that you're supposed to go at it alone. So if you want to create this type of brotherhood, then you're going to have to do it yourself,
Yeah.
which requires you to be humble. And we don't always like being humble because it threatens our ego and our pride and our vanity and our narcissism.
Mm.
But you have to share, you have to open up. And so with guys like Wayne and other people, it's like, hey, got a question, I'm struggling with this thing, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
That's a powerful approach to building a relationship with other men who are your band of brothers, so to speak, that you can connect with and resonate with and serve, and they can serve you. But too many of us just don't do it.
Just don't do it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's paddling upstream. It's awkward. It's anti the default. It's you got to be willing to break out of that sort of. It's not celebrated initially. It's sort of almost you got to kind of be okay with that uncomfortable starting position. But again, I think that's what we should be doing as men, is not being afraid of that uncomfortable, being honest, being candid, being vulnerable. Those are not negatives, right? Those are what I think quality manhood is about. But you're right. It's not. I remember you said last time we spoke. I went back to my previous episode and I looked at my notes and you had said something you like. I think society treats men as like just stay behind the glass, so break here in case of emergency. That's what and I've always
Yeah.
remembered that. I'm like, that damn, it's never been more applicable. It's a really good quote. So
Yeah.
it's
But it's
so
even
true.
it's even worse than that, because if it was just that would be one thing. Like, we're behind the glass, in a case of emergency, shatter the glass and pull out the axe or the hose
Yeah.
and do what you need to do. That would be one thing. It's not even that. It's the fact that when we're behind the glass, it's kind of like, being at the zoo and seeing this caged lion or this amazing silverback gorilla, and everybody's like pointing and laughing at the gorilla and mocking it and
Mm,
teasing it and poking at it. That's really what's happening. It's like we're behind the glass, and every society is mocking and poking and making fun of and undermining and dismissing, and then it's like, whoa, wait, there's a problem. Break that glass. It's like, well,
right.
I don't know how much I want to serve you now, because we do, because that's our role and responsibility. But there's a growing number of men who are like, nah, you can shatter that glass, but I'm not coming out. Why would I
Right.
do that?
Take
Why
care of
would
it
I go get
yourself.
married?
Yeah.
Why would I have a family? Why would I? Yeah, exactly. I'm not doing that because you guys have mocked us and poked at us for way too long. And I'm not interested. I'm not there personally. That's not my mentality. I'm just saying there's a growing cohort of men who feel that way. And I really can't blame them for feeling that way.
Yeah. 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 I've again, I've said this before. You look at this, the 80s and 90s sitcoms, right? Who's the dunce walking in the door that just seems to
Of
just fuck
course.
up everything? And oh, here comes stupid. It's not Mrs. Stupid. It's Mr. Stupid. It's the husband, right? He's the
Yeah.
dumb guy. Everyone else has got their shit together, and the guy comes in. What's happening? It's funny, I guess, but it's a tiny little viewport into exactly what you're saying. Like that is absolutely
I don't
okay to
even
make
think
fun
it's
of the guy
funny.
who, yeah,
It's just not an accurate reflection of men. Now, you know what would be funny is mocking an accurate reflection of men. Of like, for example, a guy maybe trying too hard, or uh, you know, um, maybe doing a project but screwing it up, but still that project is a no. That's an accurate reflection. Like we can laugh at
sure,
ourselves. I'm not
sure,
saying we
yeah,
can't laugh at ourselves,
absolutely.
but if you're the dunce, but then also same thing with women. They're not portrayed as the dunce. They're portrayed as the boss babe, who has to act like a man, who has to go out into the workforce and earn as much money as her male counterpart. Otherwise, she's meaningless. She's nothing. We use terms like birthing person and chest feeder and bleeder and these kind of things, and we dismiss and just diminish women down to the lowest common denominator, which is their natural ability to give birth and nurture children. And I'm not dismissing that. That's a beautiful thing. I, it's crazy what we do to both men and women. Heaven forbid a woman decides that she wants to have a baby, or she wants to nurture her children, or she wants to love and support, or stay at home even, or that she's not so focused on financial pursuits or career aspirations, and she's more interested in meaningful work and serving other people. That
or,
stuff
or
isn't highlighted
fostering an
either. So
amazing human being that's going to be the next generation of good human beings, creating a good solid basis of society. Like why when did that become
exactly.
a not good enough thing? Like I'm pretty sure it's
Yeah.
it's like the
Yeah.
foundation of all of us. If our
Yeah.
moms didn't do some version of that, we would be in a much different spot. You know what I mean? It's yeah, and the underpinning of everything we're talking about, we have in real time. Society is for those listening, we're in the United States here. Society is basically telling us, you know, there's the traditional foundations are all shit, and men are women and women are men. So we're trying to like navigate this landscape, and then you can't pivot, you can't hook on your moral compass onto anything, and we wonder why things are so screwed up. I mean, and it's all. I know we're getting political now, but whatever. You can't take it out of our conversation. I mean, and you wonder why we're so screwed up and can't actually make a decision or even understand which way is up and down. And if you even question that, it's somehow framed as a lack of compassion or bigotry or hatred. And it's like you kind of need some foundation, and I think even that's getting shattered. So I just don't have, like, if we just allow this to continue, I don't know where we go in 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. What you do is you foster men, and you talk about manhood and ensuring that men understand what it is to be good men, to be vulnerable. And I think you do a service to all of us, men and women. Frankly, I'm not just saying that. If anyone can look up your content, I think they'd agree. Has what's going on in society infiltrated that, affected the way your message? Or I would assume not, but
only positively, because
hmm,
sane, rational people appreciate the work that we're doing.
yeah,
It's the insane, it's the irrational who don't appreciate what we're doing. But
hmm,
for the overwhelming majority of the population, look, men want to be men.
yeah,
I can't tell you how many I'll say it this way, males that I hear from who say, and these are grown adult males who are saying, I grew up without a father, he wasn't around, or I didn't learn these skills, and I'm trying to be a man now. Like, do you have any tips or advice? Yes, I do,
yeah,
because they know they want to be more manly. And I hear from women, there's always a percentage of our audience, and it's anywhere from 15 to 20% of our audience, even though we're called Order of Man, who listen to my podcast, who engage in what we're doing, who buy our products and services and events and things like this. Well, why are they listening? Well, they're listening because they appreciate real manliness, and they're looking for it in two places. They're looking for it in their husbands.
hmm,
I hear that a lot. Hey, my husband's really having a hard time, really struggling, and oh, man, I want him to get the help he needs, and I want him to get back on path, and I want him to lead me and our family. And what do you think? Do you have any resources? The other camp they fall into is they're oftentimes single mothers of boys, and they're
Mm,
trying to raise boys. And the dad is not around for whatever reason. No judgment there, just for whatever reason, the man's not around, and they want to ensure that their sons have a healthy male role
yep.
model and perspective in their lives. So sane, rational people love what we do.
Hmm.
And I really don't get a lot of pushback on what we do because it's principled. And you'll never, I'm not a misogynist, even though I've been described that. I'm not a transphobe or homophobe, even though I've been described as that at times by certain people. If you actually listen to what we're doing, I'm here to serve men who can go out and serve other people. And for the women out there, I honor women. I love women. I love what they bring to their families, to their communities, to this country.
Hmm.
They bring an element of support and nurturing and softness and grace and beauty that men just don't generally possess. And we work really well together. So men and women appreciate the work that we're doing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I absolutely assume that was the case. Just good to hear that that's reality. That's what you're experiencing.
Yeah.
You know, men have a true purpose, and thus women have a true purpose. And it's a 1 + 1 = 3 thing with I think with the marriage and any relationship with a man and a woman. So I think we've just gotten away from that, and
Well,
it's kind of it's just bothering.
yeah. Well, and I also think it's okay to just like unbunch your panties for a little bit. It's like lighten up.
Yeah,
If I make a joke about women's driving or something, it doesn't mean that I hate women. It doesn't mean that, I'm this misogynist. Like, it just means it's a joke and it's funny,
yeah.
and that's actually a danger I see in
I think
society
jokes are
is
illegal now, aren't they? Officially.
they are, man. You can't talk about anything
Yeah.
anymore. The funniest comedians I know talk about gender, they talk about sex, they talk about race, they talk about any sort of political divide. They talk about all the things that society's not supposed to talk about. And in the past, we collectively have given them permission to do so to ease the tension a little bit. It's like, yeah, cool, make fun of black people, make fun of white people, make fun of women, make fun of men, make fun of gay people, make fun of trans people, like make fun of everybody. Like nothing's off limits
Yeah.
because the rest of us can't. So we're going to give you permission to go ahead and do it, just to let go of a little steam now and then. But man, we can't even barely do that
I think
anymore.
people miss the irony of the fact that, like, in fact, I wrote down. You follow Bill Burr at all? He's one of my favorite stand-up comedians.
I know who he is.
Okay.
I've seen maybe a couple of things, but not a whole
I
lot.
love his content. Just. I mean, he's one of my favorites. From Boston guy. Just I've always loved him. But he does exactly what you just said. He makes fun of everyone equally. But he digs into I say modern day comedians. I think comedians today, I believe, are modern day philosophers. Like the real good ones, the Dave Chappelle's. Right. If you really look at their content, they're brilliantly sending a message to the rest of us. Not all of them. Some of them are just
Agreed.
shit jokes and stuff. But a lot of them are the good ones. I think are I think they are modern day philosophers. They weave a story and mock society that we all can resonate with. And the Chappelles and the Bill Burrs and the ones that have made it to the absolute top, they're making it to the top for a reason. Because we're all saying, shit, yeah, we can't say that. Gosh, it's so true. Why can't we say that? There's still like the untouched, group of our society that could kind of, almost be untouched and uncancelable. And I hope that stays the same. I hope we can just laugh at it. We can all laugh at each other just as humans. It's like, come on, man. We're just,
Yeah.
we
Yeah, I
just need to
agree.
laugh at ourselves a little bit. Like, yeah, that was crazy. Like, it's just, you're right. Unbunch your panties. I love that. That's should be it's gonna be the title of this episode.
The title of the episode.
Go,
Yeah.
so one thing you touched on, I just brought up Bill Burke. I later have a note here. So you obviously went through a relationship struggle. So I'm sure there was a lot of, I'm sure you were going through therapy and between your wife and you. And uh, one observation I've had talking to friends and others that have gone through what you went through, whether they had divorce or they're kind of struggling with it right now and trying to keep the marriage together. Do you feel like the men? I've heard this from folks, and this is not my position, but it's something that I've been trying to observe. It's and Bill Burr's joke is what was this. It was he's talking about his struggles with his wife on stage. He's talking right, and he's saying, I feel like we've been going through like therapy, and he goes, Bill goes, I feel like I'm always working on me. We're always working on me. Like she's this little like she's this like piece of diamond under like museum glass that's been perfect forever, never touch it. And he goes, and I feel like I'm this building, in that city that's surrounded by scaffolding that's never been finished. so so the
Yeah.
joke resonates because I've heard other guys kind of echo that sentiment. Again, and this is not saying, oh, men are always wrong and men are always right, but have you? Obviously, we have different needs and different struggles and different ways to kind of grow, within a relationship. But have you? Did you feel like it was 50-50, or were you personally going through so much where you feel like, hey, I got to fix my shit if I'm going to make this relationship work? It's really on me. Or is it kind of a 50-50 thing, would you say?
Well, I'll answer the question in the spirit of the question, but before I get to
Yeah.
that, I would say it doesn't really matter. Like it really doesn't. Just fix yourself. Like
Sure.
we
Yeah.
we
Agreed.
do get wrapped up in things that are beyond our control. It's like, well, she doesn't have to work on herself. Not only is that not true, it's actually irrelevant.
Doesn't matter. No, I agree with that. Yeah.
What
Yep.
you have to fix yourself. You have to work on yourself, regardless if she does or not. And in a relationship, let's just hypothetically assume that you're the one as a man putting in all the effort, and she's not doing anything. And you know what's going to happen is you guys are going to split.
Hmm.
Either you're going to get tired of it, or she is, and at some point you're going to split, and then you're going to be in a better position because you actually improved yourself rather than just wallowed in your own self pity and complained about her not doing her part. So it really doesn't matter. I don't like getting wrapped up in like, well, she didn't. So what? So what is that? Does that give you a permission not to improve
Hmm.
yourself? Of course it doesn't. But in the spirit of your question, I think that, yeah, probably from a societal perspective, it's more common that we expect the men to fix themselves and fix the problems.
Mm.
That's the burden of leadership. That's the burden of being a man. I told you we're protectors, providers, presiders. So when shit hits the fan, people generally don't look to women. Like if there's a natural disaster, some sort of an emergency, or something that somebody needs to deal with, people don't look to women. And that's not a knock on women at all. It just isn't really their, I was going to say strong suit. I don't want to say that. It's not really their purview, if you will.
Mm.
Like generally women are very well suited for supporting, nurturing, loving, empathy,
Hmm.
kindness, like these sorts. That's not to say they can't lead. It's not to say they can't provide. I know plenty of amazing women who do well in their careers. It's not to say any of that. But when things go south, women are looking to men. Wives are looking to their husband, and they want to know, is this a guy who's capable of protecting me? Is
Hmm.
this a guy who's capable of providing for my physical, mental, emotional, and financial needs? So yeah, they're going to test. You may not like it, but they're going to test and make sure that you're somebody who can do those things, cuz they're putting a lot of trust and faith in your ability to do so.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that said, yeah, women should work on themselves too, right? They should have friends, they should have hobbies, they should have interests, they should be into self-development. May not look the same as me. Like I read a lot of self-help books and listen to podcasts, and a lot of women aren't necessarily into that, but they do have hobbies, and those hobbies are great. They do have girlfriends, and having those girlfriends is great. So we should, as
Yeah.
husbands, encourage and expect and support our wives in their own self-development journey,
Yeah. For sure.
just like the way that I think most most women would expect and hope and support their men in doing the same for
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah. No, no, I like your answers, Ryan. And I want to just clarify the basis of the question because I know how it could be perceived a little differently. So in my notes, I reference Bill Burr as that joke because I think that joke resonates because it does seem like the man's always fixing himself. At least that's what makes the headlines. Oh, the guy's either the one, he's the drunk, he's the guy not being the father, he's working too hard, and that's kind of what the image is portrayed. I think that's why his joke resonates. But what I was really getting at is like, and in my notes I sent you, I big onto this evolutionary mismatch concept that you kind of articulated earlier, where we were, men are meant to be like, expend as little calories as possible, preserve as much. All what that kind of description you kind of gave. I fast forward us to current society, and I'm always wondering, are men more out of place by their default in modern day society? And is there something in us men that just kind of like, evolutionarily, it's really it's tough to say, oh yeah, we can just our default we just exist in this hyper, commercialized and hyper connected society. It's really we're not, right? We're not supposed to be interfacing with thousands and thousands of people, on a daily basis because you have a phone, right? We belong in small tribes where isolation from that tribe meant you would die, right? And
Literally.
all this sort of evolutionary mismatch. And I just get at like, and again, it's for me to try to understand myself and other men that may be struggling, because I like to bring up that evolutionary mismatch where, yeah, it's we have to understand that there's a sort of relationship there between our biology and society that's not in phase, right? It's out of phase a little bit, and I think knowing that is important. So you can first of all recognize it, like, these feelings I'm having of, if you just look at it objectively, you have one partner that you're gonna have sex with forever. That's kind of weird evolutionarily, right? I believe it's the right thing. We're not animals. I totally believe in that, right? But your default is kind of weird, right? Um, you're sitting in a queue with fluorescent lights day in and day out that so many men have to do. It's not the default. Our biology is saying get out, get into nature, chase an animal once in a while, go hunting, just feel the sun. There's so many things I think we accept as normal today, and I think it adds to the just to the not feeling so good day in and day out. And I feel like more of us need to address that, recognize it, do hard physical activity. Being sedentary is so bad for us. Eating the shit food is so bad for us. Sitting on our ass all day is so bad for us. Social media is so bad. I mean, so I always go back to that. I know this is a long-winded sort of explanation here, but I think understanding the underpinnings of who we are biologically as humans, I feel like sometimes impacts men sometimes more as a mismatch in current day society than women. And I might be wrong about that. I don't know. I feel like, again, I've never been a woman. I can't describe, but it seems like it's basically, I'll summarize with this. It seems like they figured it out better than we have. That's what I'll end with. Like, they just seem to, their default is very much what society needs. And our default is kind of like, hey, don't be careful. Those primal urges are going to fuck you up. And am I onto anything there, or am I
Yeah.
just coming at it the wrong
I
way?
mean, I think I understand what you're saying, and yeah, when you talk about these primal urges, and I wouldn't even say primal urges as much as, because that almost has a negative
It
connotation
does.
to
Yeah.
it. Urges, like, but there is a sort of primal side of men that we have in a way evolved out of. Almost like life is easy. You don't have to go out and hunt your food. You just go down to the local, natural foods or whatever they call it,
Yeah.
and pick out your soy-based, vegan, grass-fed, whatever.
Yeah.
That's pretty convenient. Like, when's the last time that anybody listening to this podcast has dealt with a face-to-face encounter with another human where their life was at risk? I know it happens. I'm not saying it
Right.
doesn't, but the odds of that happening are drastically reduced relative to what they were 1,000 years ago, or maybe even 100 years
Yep.
ago. So the odds of us having to go out and defend ourselves or our women or our property is less than it's ever been. Our access to resources is more abundant than it's ever been.
Mm.
We're not dying of medical complications that our forefathers died of even 50, 60, 70 years ago. That's not happening. We're living longer. Look at what we're doing right now. I mean, we used to have this conversation around a fire, naked, cold, starving, and the risk of a neighboring warring tribe coming to kill us while we're doing it.
Right.
And now here we are in this climate controlled building. Where do you live?
I'm
Are
in
you in
DC.
Boston? Oh, you're in
Yeah.
DC. So you're on the other side of the country. And here we are having this conversation using this incredible technology, reaching tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people. That's incredible.
Both still
And it's
naked though.
easy. Yeah.
You're not.
In case you're not, in case you want to check this out on YouTube, you might want to.
Yeah. No.
Or
Yeah.
don't pan down below the shirt, below the
I got a half
waist,
shirt
right?
on, nothing else.
That's right. um, but yeah, life's just easier. And so the role of man has, in a lot of ways, I'm hesitant to say it this way because I don't want people to take it out of context, but what we're naturally built for is a little bit more obsolete than it once was. But That said, it doesn't mean that we can't harness our characteristics for productive outcomes. I talked
Mm,
about it in my last book, Masculinity Manifesto. Violence, dominance, aggression, stoicism, competitiveness. These are things that these are virtues that have negative connotations to them, but wielded correctly through capable men, righteous men, they can actually have very positive outcomes. Competitiveness, are you kidding? That's not bad. That's good.
absolutely.
Everything that anybody's listening to right now for this podcast, or the dresser or the desk that they're sitting at and the bed that they're sleeping in, was built off the back of competition, healthy capitalistic competition. Like when you went into the store, you actually evaluate. It's likely that you evaluated cost versus quality when you bought that bedspread that you have on your bed. Well, that's a product of competition.
Absolutely.
So we mock these things, and yet we are the benefactor of these things. People will complain about wealthy people, and the wealthy need to pay their fair share, and they're doing it on this computer, this supercomputer that's in their pocket. They're not worried about food. They're not worried about somebody murdering them. They've got this technology, and they're complaining about wealthy people.
That was,
You're wealthy.
yeah.
Like, what are you complaining
They're
about?
planning on a phone.
You're a wealthy
They're planning on
person.
a phone that was probably delivered in one day because Amazon did what they did based out of capitalism.
Right.
As
Exactly.
opposed to waiting. By the way, there's batteries in these phones that children in the Congo are digging in horrific environments, by the way. So we all got to be careful about getting a little too righteous. So yeah. So dig
Right.
into that. It'll
Right.
blow your mind. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
But we don't want to dig into that. We just want the damn thing to work.
Right.
We don't want to know why or how or no.
Well, but then I got a tweet.
Not me.
I got a tweet to other people how they don't how socially responsible they are because they don't have a whatever in their Twitter bio or whatever the next thing is when they're just literally tweeting
Or they're
from
driving a Prius around
yeah
or whatever, right?
yeah well,
Yeah.
so,
Which is fine. Like, drive a Prius, sure, but like let's be realistic about what's actually happening. And you're a recipient of the things that you're complaining about.
absolutely none of us are not. I think that's we all have to be a little bit more
Right.
humble about and yeah
Yeah.
yeah yeah yeah. Well, let me ask you this. I'm curious about your. I assume I don't know you personally, but how has your faith affected your viewport on all of this? I feel like again, I think I see. I think we share a lot of things in common. How has your faith shaped your answers to my questions? Your outlook on life. Your everything. I mean, if faith cannot not. If you're a faithful person, it sort of underpins everything you do in life. How you think. You fail a lot, but you have a certain moral compass. What's your walk in faith? How's that been how's that supported your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm spiritual in that I believe in God. Religious, maybe not quite so much religious, but that being said, I'm not anti-religion either.
Mm,
There's a lot of people who are. It's like, oh, religion is the root of all the thing that are wrong in this world. I don't think that. I think religion is a great way to build in traditions and customs based on moral principles. It's a way to band with other people and connect with other people who believe similar to you. Like, I think the institution of religion can actually be a very powerful thing if it's done in
mm,
righteousness. If it's used to perpetuate evil, then of course I would say that that's not a healthy thing for society. But yeah, I think having a higher power or something to be striving towards, and even an eternal perspective, is really crucial for me, because it helps me see that what I'm doing now not only impacts me in the moment, but impacts me eternally, forever. But it also helps me see things in perspective, that even though something goes wrong in this life, or I'm dealing with a particular struggle or a challenge, like, that's a blip on the radar in the grand scheme
hmm
of things. And the way that I respond to these situations is more important than the situation itself. The situation is going to go away. It will expire. And even if it doesn't, you're going to start feeling differently about the
Sure.
current reality that you're in. It's not going to hurt as bad if you're struggling, for example. But if you have some sort of moral guide in the way that you operate, it's unwaivable. It's unshakable. So society might tell you, "Oh, you got to act like this and do that and do this," and you're so grounded in your beliefs that you cannot be stirred or shaken into doing something that goes against your moral or your virtue. It's a great litmus test for the way that you operate your life.
Hmm.
When you're confronted with two or more choices, you choose the right one. Well, what's the right one? You already know what the right one
Yeah.
is, especially if you have some sort of objective moral compass guiding that decision. And when you feel guilty about making a decision, it's because you know you didn't choose the right one.
Right.
There's situations where you genuinely don't know if you should do this business thing or that business thing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about moral choices.
Yeah.
If you see somebody struggling on the side of the road, do you help that person? You already know you should help that person, right? If you see a friend in need, do you ignore it or do you sacrifice your own well-being to serve that other person? We already know. If we're going to be angry or vindictive to somebody, do they deserve that and we should do that? Or do they not deserve that and we should afford some grace? We already know the answer to it.
Right.
And that's a powerful way to live, because if you're doing it correctly, and I'm not saying I do all the time, but if you live to that standard, your guilt melts away, the shame goes away, and you can hold your head high and your chest out and feel confident in the way you're marching forward in your life, regardless of the circumstances you find yourself in.
Hmm. Are you a Christian? I mean, I would
I am,
assume
yeah,
you are.
Christian.
Okay. You don't say that word too often, but I mean, I am as well. And you say things like we're fallen, we're not born good. Like you say, I mean, you can just see the tenets. I'm like, oh, he thinks the Bible's more than just a bunch of cool pages that some philosopher wrote. Like, I mean, I can,
Personally, I do. And
yeah,
look, I don't actually care if you don't.
right, right.
And the reason I say that, actually, I'll give you an example. We were in one of our Iron Council calls this morning. We do a call every Friday morning, and we were talking about how do you know if you made the right decision and like how do you evaluate it. And I pulled up, I think it's, let me just see. I think it's Matthew 7:16 through 20, I believe. Let me just pull this up real quick. Yeah, that's it. So Matthew 7:16 through 20, and I'll just read the first one, verse 16. It says, "Ye shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles?" Like, that's the answer. So I don't care if you're religious or you believe in the Bible or you don't. That's good advice.
Right, 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 right.
Like, look at the outcome of what you're producing. Look, like if you're worried about your fitness and nutrition, look in the mirror. How do you look? Do you look like the Pillsbury Doughboy? Then you're not doing the behavior that's right. That's gonna produce
Right.
the desired result. Or do you look like the statue of David? Okay, whatever you're doing is working.
Right.
Like, I saw a guy at the gym this morning. I'm like, man, that guy's fit, and I saw him do some sort of movement. I'm like, that's weird. Why is he's doing that wrong? Like, is
Right.
he?
Yeah.
He looks pretty good to me.
Right, right.
Like, who am I to judge? Because he actually looks like he's pretty fit and pretty strong, and I'd actually like to look a lot like that guy. Who am I to judge?
Yeah.
Based on his
Babe Ruth didn't
results.
swing the baseball bat correctly, according to coaches so far. It's like, okay, well,
Exactly.
look at that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I bring that up because it's again, it's probably inconsequential to your message, but it just yeah, I just hear those tenets, and it helps you understand someone where their kind of roots are, and because but you're right. If you think the Bible is a cool book with some cool stories, or like literally the penned by God, it doesn't in any way change how awesome some of those messages are. Right? You from both folks, I think both angles, you can be like, damn, that's awesome. You know what I mean? So.
I know a lot of people who would not consider themselves religious, but they've studied theology,
Yep.
and they're an interesting one for me because they don't have that spiritual religious connection to it,
Mm-hmm.
but from a pragmatic approach to life, they can actually see that a lot of the tenets of religion, whether it's Christianity or Buddhism or whatever it may
Yeah.
be, can actually lead somebody to a better life. So it's
Oh,
interesting.
100%. Yeah, I've had that conversation with folks, I think. And I think that's one of the issues we have in society. Without that something greater than myself assumption, it's tough to really work through some things, right? It is, that, I think AA is based on that, right? I forget the background in AA, we talked about that earlier, but there's always that sort of,
Higher
yeah, there's
power is what they
always
talk
that,
about.
I just need to give it up to something, right? And I think Christianity knocks out of the park with that. And a lot of the faiths do, frankly. And even if you don't know what that thing is, just having some obscure, greater than myself thing that you're kind of giving something up to tends to be the basis of mindfulness, and even the secular beliefs. It always seems to have a general tenet there that helps. But and I heard one, I think,
Most people do. Like, you hear a lot of people use the term
Yeah.
universe, but if you listen to what they're saying, they're not talking about the universe as just some
Yeah.
random
Random atoms, right? Yeah.
thing. They're talking about it as a sentient entity. Like the universe will reward you if you do right. Okay, then you believe in a higher, like a sentient
Right.
higher. You're saying that the universe is actively working in your behalf towards you, for you, if you do the right
Right.
things.
Right.
That's a
Yeah.
higher power. That's somebody
I've
who's spiritual.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. It's so funny you say that, man. I say it all the time. So I'm like, wait, so you saying the universe, like the random groupings of atoms that have absolutely no common organization or design or anything is going to help you? Well, you can't have both. You got to kind of, you're just, I feel like that's a hedge against acknowledging some higher power. They don't want to go that far. But like, oh, the universe will reward you. And I've said that exact. And I've had some conversations that get a little heated on that. I'm like, I'm not saying that you have to believe in the God that I'm talking about, but you got to at least admit that you're not saying that random grouping of atoms that's billions of years old is somehow going to align to help your cause. That makes no sense. You can't have it
Yeah.
both ways, right?
Somebody told me, and they said, along the lines of what you say, hedge.
Mm,
And I don't know whether this is true or not, but it was an interesting thought. They said the reason that people say that is because they want the benefit of this higher power working on their behalf without the responsibility of living their life a certain way
mm,
and the accountability that comes with calling it God.
mm.
I don't know if that's true or not, but it's an interesting consideration, and I like to explore some of
Yeah,
those
it's
things.
something there. No, there's something there. And you also, and we'll wrap up with this. Stoicism. I so you did a podcast, and it was so timely for me because I love some of the Stoics and some of their principles, and then I always sometimes wonder, is that in conflict with my faith, my Christianity, and I don't think it is. I don't think it is. I think that was your position on
I
that
don't either.
conversation. Would you agree?
Yeah, there is a lot of Christians that I've had conversations with that believe it is,
Mm,
but to me, Stoicism is nothing more than striving to understand your emotions, not suppressing them, not
yeah.
hiding them, but to strive to understand your emotions and then learn what you can from those emotions, not react emotionally, but use your emotions as a factor in the decision making process. And don't allow your emotional response to dictate how you live your life, but take it into consideration in a healthy way. If I'm angry, that's okay to be angry. As somebody who would say I wouldn't say I'm a stoic, but I'm somebody who tries to be stoic. I'm not afraid of being angry,
Yeah.
but there's a difference between being angry and punching the wall. So if one of my sons goes and punches the wall, I might say to him, "Hey, why'd you punch that hole in the wall?" And their response is, "Well, I'm angry." No, because those are two different
Mm,
things. Your anger didn't make you punch a hole in the wall. We shouldn't equate that. You were, because you could be angry and do something else, but you were angry and you decided to punch a hole in the
right.
wall. So why that? That's an inappropriate response to anger.
Right. Stoics would
A
say
more
create
appropriate
that.
response,
Stoics would say, you get that feeling, create space before the reaction.
create the
Create that
space.
space, right? Yeah.
And then you can respond to it. So a more appropriate way would be like, you notice the blood boiling. I get this way even with my kids. I grow impatient, or they're testing
Mm,
me, and I'm not going to go physically abuse one of my children. That would be clearly inappropriate. But I might excuse myself from the situation for 5 minutes and think about, okay, you're angry because your kid said he was going to do the dishes and they didn't, and now there's a mess and you don't have any plates for dinner. Okay, like this isn't the end of the world. Let's let's teach them some responsibility. They can go ahead and wash a few dishes by hand, so we have dishes for
right. Right.
dinner, and then they'll learn their lesson and we solve the problem. Like that's an appropriate
Right.
response to anger.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't hear a lot of anti-biblical message in that. So
anti
I
what?
don't hear a lot of anti-biblical messaging in that framework. I mean, it's just it's completely congruous to.
I
I
mean,
mean, you could Google, and I've done this earlier. You can Google like Bible, Stoic messages directly out of the Bible, and there's just thousands of things that you just see. Like, oh yeah, that could easily be considered a Stoic message, and it was right out of Luke or Matthew. I'm just scrolling through here. It's just like, yeah, because it just makes sense.
I think I think the hang up is for Christians that have an issue with that. I don't think it's the practice of stoicism. I think it's the label,
Hmm.
is that they believe that you're now worshiping or following some other sort of practice because there's a label
Yeah.
associated with it. But like, you wouldn't say that about being kind,
Right.
right? Like, nobody puts the label on it that it's competing with Christianity. But if you wrap that up in some sort of other practice, then it's not the practice itself, it's the
The
label
label.
that
Yeah.
creates the
Yeah.
problem.
I think I would hear, I have a lot of Christian friends that would say, and I've had these conversations where, well, you put too much reliance on yourself and your ability to handle the situation yourself. If you take some of these stoic approaches to things, as opposed to, God, I'm going to hand it up to you. And it's like, I don't know if I just, I think ultimately God's in control, but I think he wants me to be responsible and and take some free will action a lot, in the,
Well, we know that because we have our agency.
mm,
So we know that what you're saying is accurate, that we have a responsibility, a moral responsibility to behave and act correctly, because we have been given the responsibility of doing that
mm,
and the right of being able to act on our own behalf. That's not to say his hand isn't involved, but we are free to choose. We know that biblically. We are
yeah,
free to choose our own path, and we're expected to do
mm,
the right things with it.
right, right. Yeah, and if this label called stoicism helps us do that, I don't see a contradiction. Screw the label, right? I think you're right with that, with labeling the label, if you will, as you did, and as the problem, not necessarily
Yeah.
the practice. Ryan, this is
Yeah.
awesome, man. Where can folks find you?
Orderman.com is our headquarters. You like podcasts, you're listening to this one. So we've got the Orderman podcast. And then I'm really active, mostly on Instagram at Ryan
Mm,
Michler. My last name is Michler. So you'll find everything that we're doing through those three resources.
super cool, man. Hey, man, thanks for the hour. Love your content, folks. Check them
Yeah,
out,
you
seriously.
bet.
I mean, call it self-help, call it whatever you want, but there's just you're good at what you do, man. I appreciate all the work you do, so thanks so much.
Thanks, Vinny. Appreciate the
Yeah,
opportunity,
dude.
man.